Welcome to the Reality Revolution. I'm your host, Brian Scott. Today's episode, we're going to talk about the sexual transmutation of energy and sexual transmutation and reality creation. I have not really dedicated an episode to this, maybe just trying to avoid it. Didn't want to get too crazy. But there is an undeniable link to sexual transmutation and reality creation and what we're going through right now in this transition. I know that sounds crazy and strange, but I have done several episodes on something called the Law of One, which is a channeled work where they spoke to a high-dimensional being back in the 80s, a very detailed channeled work. I definitely recommend you check out my other episodes to understand what that is, but in this channeled work, they explained that galaxies throughout the universe transfer and raise in density and change their consciousness. And when this happened for this particular group, who was from 3 billion years ago, an evolved version of the entities that existed on Venus, well, they did it through sexual transmutation of energy. So there is some practice they were doing that allowed them to transform and move into a social memory complex. It sounds crazy that they're related, but if you understand the power of sex, it's referred to in so many things. In the Neville Goddard lectures, he repeatedly uses a metaphor, a sexual metaphor, to describe the idea of reality creation. And The Secret of the Sperm is one of the lectures that he gives on this. The idea that when you enter into a reality, you are creating it. And he has a breathing technique that is very sexual. It's an explosion. If you think about sex, it is a creative energy. You and I came from some sexual experience. It is how the universe is created. Some people say that the life on Earth is the result of a sexual transmutation of the sun and the earth together. So when you think of it like that, there is a unique energy that comes from sexuality. In the Law of One material, they talk about the exchange of sexual energy. This is talked about on so many different episodes. Different people that teach the Law of Attraction, they talk about NoFap. I'm not going to really dedicate this episode to that, but all I can say is that people have really succeeded in many cases by not masturbating or withholding their sexual urges. There is lots of ways to do it. I don't think there's a requirement of it, but what I have found is that people in a sexual relationship exchange energies. So there isn't necessarily a loss of energy. And in certain kinds of relationships, sexual relationships can result in an expansion of energies. But I really wanted to discuss some of the different teachings about this that you may find interesting. How can we know what Ra did on Venus when it became this social memory complex, when it expanded and moved into their new Venus, when they moved into their fourth density or 5D? How could it be related to sex? Well, I asked that question to Jim McCarty in my interview on the Law of One. And in that interview, he explained that they did think that it was done through couples. They found that the best way for it to work was between two people. And he gives an explanation that they did this through an exchange of these energies. I won't be reading anything from the Law of One material, but I can explain what they basically taught. We exchange energies when we do have sex. And for people in the lower energies, it's domination. It's about survival or domination and control in the orange and red and even the yellow chakras. Once you get up into the green, into the heart-based chakras in the throat, it's a sharing that comes purely from love. And the people who are unable to love can't exchange these energies. These energies have a marked change on our total mind-body-spirit complex, affecting everything. But in terms of reality creation, if you want to create your reality, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich actually has an entire chapter on this. And it's one of the reasons that that book stands out. And I always come back to it because we're not talking about sex with this episode. We're talking about the energy of sex. But Ra doesn't really get a chance to explain what techniques they used and how it works. You can read about sex in magic from people like Aleister Crowley, and it didn't turn out well. Sometimes some of these organizations that start using sexual magic, it does not turn out well. So there has to be some better understanding of it. I've heard whisperings of some amazing Tantra techniques that are used in exchanging sexual energies. But the key is you don't have to have the release. This energy can be transmuted and used for other things. And Napoleon Hill explains that in Think and Grow Rich. But what techniques can we use and how can it work? What did they use? Well, it's possible that they taught Tantra techniques in Egypt when the Great Pyramid was built. And these may be related to Ra's teachings. So I wanted to find out more about that. And they did mention an author in the Law of One when they were talking to Ra, Elizabeth H. She has written a book called Initiation, where she had memories from a previous life of being initiated in Egyptian ceremonies in the pyramid itself. She also wrote a book on sexual energy and yoga, which is really fascinating. Another interesting thing is the discussion of Drunvalo Melchizedek's book, The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, and he has a technique called onking. And the reason it's called that is it's similar to the shape of the ankh, and we will cover that later in this episode. But I wanted to gather a little bit of information and discuss it with you because it is a key component. And when I do the explosion technique, it's similar. There's so many similarities between the act of sex and the explosion of sex and the orgasm and effective reality creation techniques, which seem to be an explosion of energy, the ones that work very effectively. In Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill claims the meaning of the word transmute is, in simple language, the changing or transferring of one element or form of energy into another. The emotion of sex brings into being a state of mind. Because of ignorance on the subject, this state of mind is generally associated with the physical, and because of improper influences to which most people have been subjected in acquiring knowledge of sex, things essentially physical have highly biased the mind. The emotion of sex has back of it the possibility of three constructive potentialities. They are: 1, the perpetuation of mankind; 2, the maintenance of health. As a therapeutic agency, it has no equal; and 3, the transformation of mediocrity into genius through transmutation. Sex transmutation is simply and easily explained. It means the switching of the mind from thoughts of physical expression to thoughts of some other nature. Sex desire is the most powerful of human desires when driven by this desire. Men develop keenness of imagination, courage, willpower, persistence, and creative ability unknown to them at other times. So strong and impelling is the desire for sexual contact that men freely run the risk of life and reputation to indulge it. When harnessed and redirected along other lines, this motivating force maintains all of its attributes of keenness of imagination, courage, which may be used as powerful creative forces in literature, art, or in any other profession or calling, including, of course, the accumulation of riches. The transmutation of sex energy calls for the exercise of willpower, to be sure, but the reward is worth the effort. The desire for sexual expression is inborn and natural. The desire cannot and should not be submerged or eliminated, but it should be given an outlet through forms of expression which enrich the body, mind, and spirit of man. If not given the form of outlet, Through transmutation, it will seek outlets through purely physical channels. A river may be dammed and its water controlled for a time, but eventually it will force an outlet. The same is true of the emotion of sex. It may be submerged and controlled for a time, but its very nature causes it to be ever-seeking means of expression. If not transmuted into some creative effort, it will find a less worthy outlet. Fortunate indeed is the person who has discovered how to give sex emotion an outlet through some form of creative effort, for he has, by that discovery, lifted himself to the status of a genius. Scientific research has disclosed these significant facts. 1. That men or women of greatest achievement are men or women with highly developed sex natures. Men and women who have learned the art of sex transmutation. And 2. Those who have accumulated great fortunes and achieved outstanding recognition in literature, art, industry, architecture, and the professions were motivated by the influence of a man or woman. The research from these outstanding discoveries went back through pages of biography and history for more than 2,000 years. Wherever there was evidence available in connection with the lives of men and women of great achievement, it indicated most convincingly that they possessed highly developed sex natures. The motion of sex is an irresistible force, against which there can be no such opposition as an immovable body. When driven by this emotion, men and women become gifted with a superpower for action. Understand this truth, and you will catch the significance of the statement that sex transmutation will lift one to the status of genius. The emotion of sex contains the secret of creative ability. Destroy the sex glands, whether in man or beast or woman, and you have removed the major source of action. For proof of this, observe what happens to any animal after it has been castrated. A bull becomes docile as a cow after it has been altered sexually. Sex alteration takes out of the male or female, whether man or beast, all the fight that was in them. Sex alteration of the female has the same effect. The 10 mind stimuli. The human mind responds to stimuli through which it may be keyed up to high rates of vibration known as enthusiasm, creative imagination, intense desire. The stimuli to which the mind responds most freely are 1. The desire for sex expression. 2. Love. 3. A burning desire for fame, power, or financial gain. 4. Music. 5. Friendship between either those of the same sex or those of the opposite sex. 6. A mastermind alliance based upon the harmony of 2 or more people who ally themselves for spiritual or temporal advancement. Sounds a lot like a social memory complex to me, doesn't it? And 7. Mutual suffering such as that experienced by people who are persecuted. 8. Autosuggestion. 9. Fear. And 10. Narcotics and alcohol. The desire for sex expression comes at the head of the list of the stimuli, which most effectively step up the vibrations of the mind and start the wheels of physical action. 8 of those stimuli are natural and constructive. 2 are destructive. The list is here presented for the purpose of enabling you to make a comparative study of the major sources of mind stimulation. From this study, it will be readily seen that the emotion of sex is by great odds the most intense and powerful of all mind stimuli. That's why I had to address an episode on this. By ignoring it, I'm not completely talking about reality creation as it really is. Hill goes on to say that this comparison is necessary as a foundation for proof of the statement that transmutation of sex energy may lift one to the state of a genius. Let us find what constitutes a genius. Some wiseacre has said that a genius is a man who wears long hair, eats queer food, lives alone, and serves as a target for the joke makers. A better definition of a genius is a man who has discovered how to increase the vibrations of thought to the point where he can freely communicate with sources of knowledge not available through the ordinary rate of vibration of thought. So let me read that again. This is very, very metaphysical, and Napoleon Hill was not necessarily metaphysical, saying a man who has discovered how to increase, and he's not just talking about men, all men or women. A man or woman has discovered how to increase the vibrations of thought to the point where they can freely communicate with sources of knowledge not available through the ordinary rate of vibration of thought. The person who thinks will want to ask some questions concerning this definition of genius. And the first question will be, how may one communicate with sources of knowledge which are not available through the ordinary rate of vibration of thought? The next question will be, are there known sources of knowledge which are available only to genii? And if so, what are these sources? Exactly how may they be reached? We shall offer proof of the soundness of some of the more important statements made. At least we shall offer evidence through which you may secure your own proof through experimentation, and doing so, we shall answer both of those questions. So he may be implying there is some sort of communication with a higher intelligence that occurs through this expression or transmutation of this energy. Now, I won't be addressing the topic of twin flames in this particular episode, but I do know from personal experience, a twin flame is a whole other variable that I could address an entire episode on, where there are particular people, maybe it's just one, that you meet that makes the energy exponential. So you become something completely different. 1 and 1 make 37 instead of 2. And there's an explosion of energy that's more than the normal. Hill goes on to say that genius is developed through the sixth sense. The reality of a sixth sense has been fairly well established. The sixth sense is a creative imagination. The faculty of creative imagination is one which the majority of people never use during an entire lifetime. And if used at all, it usually happens by mere accident. A relatively small number of people use with deliberation and purpose, a forethought, the faculty of creative imagination. Those who use this faculty voluntarily and with understanding of its function are geniuses. The faculty of creative imagination is the direct link between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence. All so-called revelations referred to in the realm of religion and all discoveries of basic new principles in the field of invention take place through the faculty of creative imagination. When ideas or concepts flash into one's mind through what is popularly called a hunch, they come from one or more of the following sources. 1. Infinite intelligence. 2. One's subconscious mind, wherein is stored every sense impression and thought impulse which ever reached the brain through any of the 5 senses. And 3. From the mind of some other person who has just released the thought or picture of the idea or concept through conscious thought. And 4, from the other person's subconscious storehouse. There are no other known sources for which inspired ideas or hunches may be revealed. The creative imagination functions best when the mind is vibrating, due to some form of mind stimulation, at an exceedingly high rate. That is when the mind is functioning at a rate of vibration higher than that of ordinary normal thought. When brain action has been stimulated through one or more of the 10 mind stimulants, it has the effect of lifting the individual far above the horizon of ordinary thought and permits him to envision distance, scope, and quality of thoughts not available on the lower plane, such as that occupied while one is engaged in the solution of the problems of business and professional routine. When lifted to this higher level of thought, through any form of mind stimulation, an individual occupies relatively the same position as one who has ascended in an airplane to a height from which he may see over and beyond the horizon line which limits his vision, while on the ground. Moreover, while on this higher level of thought, the individual is not hampered or bound by any of the stimuli which circumscribe and limit his vision while wrestling with the problem of gaining the three basic necessities of food, clothing, and shelter. They are in the world of thought in which the ordinary workaday thoughts have been effectively removed, as are the hills and valleys and other limitations of physical vision when he rises in an airplane. When on the exalted plane of thought, the creative faculty of mind is given freedom for action, the way has been cleared for the sixth sense to function. It becomes receptive to ideas which could not reach the individual under any other circumstance. The sixth sense is the faculty which marks the difference between a genius and an ordinary individual. The creative faculty becomes more alert and receptive to vibrations originating outside the individual's subconscious mind. The more this faculty is used, and the more the individual relies upon it and makes demands upon it for thought impulses, this faculty can be cultivated and developed only through use. That which is known as one's conscious operates entirely through the faculty of the sixth sense. The great artists, writers, and musicians and poets become great because they acquire the habit of relying upon the still small voice which speaks from within through the faculty of creative imagination. It is a fact well known to people who have keen imaginations that their best ideas come through the so-called hunches. There is a great orator who does not attain to greatness until he closes his eyes and begins to rely entirely upon the faculty of creative imagination. When asked why he closed his eyes just before the climax of his oratory, he replied, "I do it because then I speak through ideas which come to me from within." One of America's most successful and best-known financiers followed the habit of closing his eyes for 2 or 3 minutes before making a decision. So we have this concept that Hill is explaining, that sexual energy raises the vibration and changes the way that you think. He claims that from an analysis over 25,000 people, that men and women who succeed in an outstanding way seldom do so before the age of 40, and more often they do not strike their real pace until they are well beyond the age of 50. And this fact was so astounding that it prompted him to go study the cause. And the studies disclosed the fact that the major reason why the majority of men and women who succeed do not begin to do so before the age of 40 to 50 is their tendency to dissipate their energies through overindulgence in physical expression of the emotion of sex. The majority of men never learn that the urge of sex has other possibilities which far transcend in importance that of mere physical expression. The majority of those who make this discovery do so having wasted many years at a period when the sex energy is at its height prior to the age of 45 to 50. This usually is followed by noteworthy achievement. The lives of many men and women up to and sometimes well past the age of 40 reflect a continued dissipation of energies which could have been more profitably turned into better channels. Their finer and more powerful emotions are sown wildly to the four winds. Out of this habit of the male grew the term sowing his wild oats. The desire for sexual expression is by far the strongest and most impelling of all human emotions. And for this very reason, this desire, when harnessed and transmuted into action, other than that of physical expression, may raise one to the status of a genius. The world is ruled and destiny of civilization is established by the human emotions. People are influenced in their actions, not by reason, so much as by feelings. The creative faculty of the mind is set into action entirely by emotions and not by cold reason. The most powerful of all human emotions is that of sex. There are other mind stimulants which have been listed, but no one of them, nor all of them combined, can equal the driving power of sex. A mind stimulant is any influence which will either temporarily or permanently increase the vibration of thought. Through these sources, one may commune with infinite intelligence or enter at will the storehouse of the subconscious mind either one's own or that of another person. Transmutation of sex energy calls for more willpower than the average person cares to use for his purpose. Those who find it difficult to summon willpower sufficiently for transmutation may gradually acquire this ability. Though this requires willpower, the reward for the practice is more than worth the effort. The entire subject of sex is one with which the majority of people appear to be unpardonably ignorant. The urge of sex has been grossly misunderstood, slandered, and burlesqued by the ignorant and the evil-minded for so long that their very word sex is seldom used in polite society. Men and women who are known to be blessed, yes, blessed with highly sexual natures, are usually looked upon as being people who will bear watching. Instead of being called blessed, they are usually called cursed. Millions of people, even in this age of enlightenment, have inferiority complexes which they developed because of this false belief that a highly sexed nature is a curse. These statements of the virtue of sex energy should not be construed as justification for the libertine. The emotion of sex is a virtue only when used intelligently and with discrimination. It may be misused, and often is, to such an extent that it debases instead of enriches both body and mind. Intemperance in sex habits is just as detrimental as intemperance in habits of drinking and eating. In this age in which we live, an age which began with the World War, intemperance in habits of sex is common. This orgy of indulgence may account for the shortage of great leaders. No man can avail himself of the forces of his creative imagination while dissipating them. Man is the only creature on earth which violates nature's purpose in this connection. Every other animal indulges its sex nature in moderation and with purpose which harmonizes with the laws of nature. Every other animal responds to the call of sex only in season when man's inclination is to declare open season. Every intelligent person knows that stimulation in excess through alcoholic drink and narcotics is a form of intemperance which destroys the vital organs of the body, including the brain. Not every person knows that overindulgence in sex expression may become a habit as destructive and as detrimental to creative effort as narcotics or liquor. The presence of any one or more of the destructive emotions in the human mind through the chemistry of the mind sets up a poison which may destroy one's sense of justice and fairness. In extreme cases, the presence of any combination of these emotions in the mind may destroy one's reason. The road to genius consists of the development, control, and use of sex, love, and romance. Briefly, the process may be started as follows. Encourage the presence of these emotions as the dominating thoughts in one's mind, and discourage the presence of all the destructive emotions. The mind is a creature of habit. It thrives upon the dominating thoughts fed it. Through the faculty of willpower, one may discourage the presence of any emotion and encourage the presence of any others. Control of the mind through the power of will is not difficult. Control comes from persistence and habit. The secret of control lies in understanding the process of transmutation. When any negative emotion presents itself in one's mind, it can be transmuted into a positive or constructive emotion by the simple procedure of changing one's thoughts. There is no other road to genius through voluntarily self-effort. A man may attain to great heights of financial or business achievement solely by the driving force of sex energy, but history is filled with evidence that he may, and usually does, carry with him certain traits of character which rob him of the ability to either hold or enjoy his fortune. This is worthy of analysis, thought, and meditation, for it states a truth, the knowledge of which may be helpful to women as well as men. Ignorance of this has cost thousands of people their privilege of happiness, even though they possessed riches. The emotions of love and sex leave their unmistakable marks upon the features. Moreover, these signs are so visible that all who wish may read them. The man who is driven by the storm of passion, based upon sex desires alone, plainly advertises that fact to the entire world. by the expression of his eyes, the lines of his face. The emotion of love, when mixed with the emotion of sex, softens, modifies, and beautifies the facial expression. No character analyst is needed to tell you this. You may observe it for yourself. The emotion of love brings out and develops the artistic and aesthetic nature of man. It leaves its impress upon one's very soul, even after the fire has been subdued by time and circumstance. Dismiss also the thought that love never comes but once. Love may come and go, times without number, but there are no two love experiences which affect one in just the same way. There may be, and there usually is, one love experience which leaves a deeper imprint on the heart than all the others. But all love experiences are beneficial, except to the person who becomes resentful and cynical when love makes its departure. There should be no disappointment over love, and there would be none if people understood the difference between the emotions of love and sex. The major difference is that love is spiritual, while sex is biological. No experience which touches the human heart with a spiritual force can possibly be harmful except through ignorance or jealousy. Love is without question life's greatest experience. It brings one into communion with infinite intelligence. When mixed with the emotions of romance and sex, it may lead one far up the ladder of creative effort. The emotions of love, sex, and romance are sides of the eternal triangle of achievement, building, genius. Nature creates genii through no other force. Love is an emotion with many sides, shades, and colors. The love which one feels for parents or children is quite different from that which one feels for one's sweetheart. The one is mixed with the emotion of sex, while the other is not. The love which one feels is in true friendship is not the same as that felt for one's sweetheart, parents, children, but it too is a form of love. Then there's the emotion of love for things inanimate, such as the love of nature's handiwork. But the most intense and burning of all these various kinds of love is that experience in the blending of the emotions of love and sex. Marriages not blessed with the eternal affinity of love, properly balanced and proportioned with sex, cannot be happy ones, and seldom endure. Love alone will not bring happiness in marriage, nor will sex alone. When these two beautiful emotions are blended, marriage may bring about a state of mind closest to the spiritual that no one may ever know on this earthly plane. When the emotion of romance is added to those of love and sex, the obstructions between the finite mind of man and infinite intelligence are removed. Then a genius has been born. What a different story is this than those usually associated with the emotion of sex. Here is an interpretation of the emotion which lifts it out of the commonplace and makes it potter's clay in the hands of God, from which the fashions all that is beautiful and inspiring. It is an interpretation which would, when properly understood, bring harmony out of the chaos which exists in too many marriages. The disharmonies often expressed in the form of nagging may usually be traced to the lack of knowledge on the subject of sex, where love, romance, and proper understanding of the emotion and function of sex abide. There is no disharmony between married people. Fortunate is the husband whose wife understands the true relationship between the emotions of love, sex, and romance. When motivated by this holy triumvirate, no form of labor is burdensome, because even the most lowly effort takes on the nature of a labor of love. It is a very old saying that a man's wife may either make him or break him, or a woman's husband may either break her or make her. But the reason is not always understood. The making and breaking is the result of the partner's understanding or lack of understanding of the emotions of love, sex, and romance. Despite the fact that men are polygamous by the very nature of their biological inheritance, it is true that no woman has as great an influence on a man as his wife, unless he is married to a woman totally unsuited to his nature. If a woman permits her husband to lose interest in her and become more interested in other women, it is usually because of her ignorance or indifference toward the subjects of sex, love, and romance. This statement presupposes, of course, that genuine love once existed between a man and his wife. Now, a lot of what Napoleon Hill says comes from an older time and maybe has a touch of misogyny, always emphasizing the male or the female. So, the bottom line is, when the sex urge is taken up and resolved, it raises the vibration. There's a lot more interesting stuff for us to talk about. Sex goes to the very beginnings of the universe. Elizabeth H., in her book Sexual Energy and Yoga, says, "In God, the two poles rest within each other in perfect unity and absolute equilibrium. In this state there is no tension, but neither is there creation. Creation begins with the negative pole being expelled from this unity, and the two poles consequently drawing apart and becoming opposed to each other as force and resistance. Yet be they never so far removed from each other, the unity between the two poles never ceases to exist. They belong to each other through all eternity. They can never be completely sundered. Unity continues to subsist between them as magical tension of infinite power which draws the two poles back to each other without intermission in order to restore the original condition of rest between them. On this tension the whole of creation is born. Without it, no creation, no life is possible, for this very tension is life. This means that every living creature contains these two poles within itself. As its vital self, otherwise it could not live at all. In man, the seat of the positive pole is in the skull, and of the negative pole in the coccyx at the base of the spine, and the tension between these two constitutes life. Life must be propagated in the new living creature, and for a new living creature to come into being, the two opposed poles must create between them a vital tension out of which new life can be engendered. Even though every living creature, including man, bears his vital tension between the two poles in its spine, it nevertheless manifests in its body only one pole, which awaits conjunction with a contrary pole from outside before it can transmit life in a new living creature. Later on, she explains that let us look upon sexual energy as the key, which opens the door for us between spirit and the world of matter, from the higher to the lower, but also from the lower to the higher. Let us regard it, then, as the divine impetus which enables us to create further generations, to propagate life from above downwards in the body, but also to transform man upwards out of his virility into a spiritual man and to help to conquer death. We must be grateful that sexual energy used properly gives us so much happiness on both paths. On the downward path, it is brief and transient. On the upward path, it is eternal happiness. Let us use its fire to make our tree of life flourish and blossom. Let us remember, primitive man is still at the lowest level of his consciousness. In his animal egoism, he lives within himself, completely isolated and immured. His heart is still dead, and he still has no inkling of the meaning of love. Sexual energy, that elemental fire, is alone able to warm his dead heart for the first time. And even if during the brief spell of sexual excitement, he can experience and express only an inkling of love, it is notwithstanding the first glimmer of divine love. Through sexuality, he first becomes acquainted with the happiness derived from giving. And although his dawning love is still no more than an animal desire, a passion, his excitement is, even if only quite unconsciously and briefly, already an urge towards oneness, towards love. Even if at first he experiences this urge towards love only in the body, and hence can only look for physical gratification, it is nevertheless the first reflection of the spiritual oneness in the great self, which man is unconsciously seeking, and which after long development, perhaps over eons, he will find because he is destined to do so. Sexual energy causes us inner unrest, which never allows us to stand still. It continually spurs us on and compels us to find the inner path after many wanderings. In an unexpected moment among the animal impulses, in the night, in the darkness of unconsciousness, our self-awareness is born, just as the Holy Child was born in a manger among animals in the night in darkness. And man sets out on the great path. He decides to journey from the first awakening of consciousness in the self to the paradisiacal universal consciousness, to the goal. and he gradually grows conscious in himself on this long path. So there unfolds within him the ability to control creative energy in all its manifestations and to use it in accordance with his will. If he once reaches the highest level, the source of divine power, he will be able to transform the lower forms of energy of divine creatures' power into the higher forms. And with the higher spiritual forms of energy, he will be able to control and guide the lower forms and to manifest all these energies through the corresponding nerve centers. The discussion by Napoleon Hill was a theoretical discussion on how to harness and transmute sexual energy and the importance of it. Elizabeth H. has more specific yoga techniques and practices, and I recommend you read the book Sexual Energy and Yoga by Elizabeth H. Haich for a more thorough description. But there is a chapter in here on the practice, and she says the transformation of sexual energy is quite easy, and for that very reason may seem difficult to some. One is reminded of the anecdote about apprenticed alchemists who had received the infallible formula for making gold and proceeded to try it out. The most important requirement was that on no account should he think of a hippopotamus while preparing the mixture. The following morning, when asked by his master how he got on, he answered, "Thoroughly depressed. I followed all the instructions and did everything correctly, and it would have been all right. But now, although I had never known before what a hippopotamus was, when I was not supposed to think about it, a whole herd raced around in my head, and so my mixture did not turn into gold." Provided that the disciple's mind is in a constant state of timelessness, patience, then our first advice on this path is that the disciple, who is moved by inner conviction to lead an abstemious life, must on no account whatsoever make a vow. For if someone believes that he is really mature already, that he will never again think of sexual desires, that he has risen above them, and that his body obeys him, and he then takes a vow, the devil will seize him immediately and strike terror into him. He will believe that all has now been irrevocably lost. Henceforth, he must think continuously of his vow. He will be unable to think of anything else, whether he wants to or not, as if all the devils had been let loose and descended upon him. These devils are nothing else but the animal in us, as Paracelsus called this power of the body, "The flesh lusteth against the spirit, so that ye cannot do the things that ye would," as Paul described this power. And since the thoughts are tuned into sexuality again and again, the sexual organs are irritated, and the candidate will keep having sexual desires and sexual fantasies. All at once he will understand St. Anthony in the Sahara Desert, who for 40 years continuously saw highly erotic scenes, naked women tempting him and so forth, and had to fight these visions. Of course, the devils conjured up these images for him. Today, we would say that his unconscious projected them. But the result is the same. It is only a question of designation. Finally, after 40 years, St. Anthony did manage to conquer the devils, but in vain, for behold, they are still alive today. They have increased in number, and all descend upon the poor ascetic who has made a vow. So she's saying, don't make the vow, I'm never going to do this, or I'm not going to do that, because it doesn't work like that. It'll always work against you. Once more, however, we recommend that one should give up abstinence and lead a sex life based on true love, if intolerable torments have to be fought against. That is neither a disgrace nor a sin. In this way, to progress can be made, albeit more slowly. If, however, anyone perseveres in order to reach the higher stages as quickly as possible, our advice to him is that he should completely forget the vow and every possibility of one, and at the same time also whatever his vow was. He should totally forget sexuality and all that is connected with it. Very simple, isn't it? If only the devils did not exist, for even if we had seen through nature's deception completely, and find the whole business of sex with its eternal repetition very boring, the surest formula for unbearable sexual desires, which suddenly spring up and rouse the corresponding physical reactions, is for the intellect to be preoccupied with sexuality, which we really wish to conquer Thus, learn how the negative pole manifests itself and acts on us from our unconscious as the spirit of resistance. It is not surprising that in religion it is called the devil, and it is not so easy to deal with this devil, since I am it, taught in the Upanishads as Tet Devam Asi, Tet Devam Asi, thou art that. Apart from the devil of the unconscious, the body itself for the time being allows us no peace. Until now, the body has been adjusted to a sexual life. The glands continue to demand release. And as long as sexual energy does not find the way to the highest centers of manifestation, it accumulates in the sexual glands. Later, when sexual energy has found the way to the higher nerve centers through appropriate yoga exercises and can manifest itself there already as a higher form of creative power, the transformation is much easier. Then one has much more peace. The initial period is the most difficult, precisely because sexual energy, unable to find an exit, irritates the sexual organs even more. Thus, at the outset, man has a twofold difficulty to overcome. On the one hand, his imagination, his intellect allows him no peace. On the other hand, the retained sexual energy stimulates him physically still more than before. But that is exactly what is needed. For this most excessive stimulation gradually reflects upon the higher nerve centers, irritates them, and this irritation wakens them from their latent, dormant conditions, as the prince wakens the sleeping beauty with the kiss. If one has therefore struggled through the first difficulty, if one has resisted and overcome the mental and physical irritations, then the transformation is very much easier by the way of reward. It is also very important, however, that we allow the upsurging sexual energy to manifest itself through the higher nerve centers, to pour out through them. What is our best help here? Yoga exercises, concentration, meditation, and work. Physical and intellectual work. First of all, the yoga exercise is pranayama, that is to say, control of breathing. We can only really grasp the importance of breath control if we realize the fact that every sexual union imitates breathing, that is to say, the rhythmic union of the breath with the lungs. Every breath we draw is an act as life-giving as the encounter of the sexes. Breathing gives us renewed life with every breath, while sexual union gives life to a new being. That is why correct breathing gives a fulfilling, pleasurable sensation akin to that of sexual union. Pranayama and the physical exercises known to the Indians as Hatha Yoga serve to invigorate and spiritualize the body in general, thereby, of course, making and keeping it healthy. The key exercises that are mentioned here that she talks about encourage the blood flow from the lower part of the body and the head, thereby calming the sexual organs and rousing the higher centers. So the first is the candle posture, and that's the effect of this exercise is to bring the blood from the legs and abdomen into the head. So you strengthen the organs of the brain, which are the source of our memory, power, and concentration. So you lie on your back, press your arms extended parallel to the body with the palm facing downward. We breathe out calmly and deeply, and slowly and carefully raise the stretched legs until they are vertical. Then we raise the trunk, supported by both hands in the kidney area, until it is in a straight line with the feet. We breathe with the stomach and hold the position until strain is felt. Then we return slowly, first with the trunk and then stretch legs, and lie for a few moments on the floor, breathing quietly and regularly, which restores the blood circulation to its normal course. What I do that transmutes my energy personally is Qigong exercises and the 5 Tibetans, and then I hang upside down with gravity boots, or you can do headstands. I have found this to be the most effective, and they are saying this. When you can get the blood flowing to your head, just in general, what happens is gravity is always pushing everything down on some level. Your blood still circulates, but the energy itself is affected by gravity. So it's always in the lower portions of your body. Why are your legs more powerful than your arms? And a variety of other things. But if you can get, there's a number of different machines or equipment that you can use to hang upside down. And I recommend it. You can also use this to activate the plat in yoga when they talk about activating the backward chakra in the back of the head. So then there's the shoulder stand, which is doing a shoulder, supporting the hips with the hands, legs, and brought slantwise toward the head. I've always found that to be uncomfortable. There's the headstand, which can be done, if I find it easier to do, against the wall, so you have something to balance against. But all of these are moving the blood towards the head. The safest method I've found is through the 5 Tibetans. The first task must be, with the help of sexual energy, to increase the resistance of the organs in which until now creative power has lain dormant. The resistance must be raised to a level which allows creative power to emerge from its latent condition and become active. It no longer manifests itself as sexual energy, but as spiritual magical power. Progress then depends on learning the next exercise to conduct the spiritual power, which I myself am, everywhere in my body, that is to say, to penetrate everywhere with my ego and to send my radiation into my whole body. For it is not sufficient to transform sexual energy, my own materialized self, and at the same time to conduct it up to the higher centers, but rather than help of these same higher centers. Our highest goal is to radiate and use vital energy as magical power. It is not enough to make the philosopher's stone. We must know how and to what purpose it can be used. So, there are a number of other techniques that you can use, but then the question comes, what about when you do have sex? I recommend that you find a sexual partner that you love and remain with that sexual partner and develop a loving relationship, first of all. There are a number of things that you can do. In magic, they will create sigils or symbols and will have sex or masturbate, create an orgasm to that symbol, and then that symbol becomes charged, and that can become a simple magic trick as well. I have considered doing a meditation where it would be intended for soulmates or twin flames, where they would both listen to it at the same time, and together meditating at the same time, looking at each other, utilize these sexual energies. But I have not, because it's kind of a weird idea for meditation, and perhaps I will create one that I will offer on my website at some point if there is enough call for that, because I've always thought that would be a great meditation if you can meditate with your partner at the same time, focusing your energy much like a group meditation, but just with your partner. And I think you can do this without a guided meditation. So I would definitely check into practices of Tantra, which are very, very interesting. Drunvalo Melchizedek, in his book, The Ancient Secret of the Flower of Life, discusses the Egyptian sexual energy and the orgasm, claiming that when human bodies practice sexual energy and orgasm, little concern is given to what happens to this energy when it is released. And most people in the world are ignorant about what happens to their sexual energy after they have an orgasm. Usually the energy moves up the spine and out of the top of the head, directly into the 8th or 13th chakra in a few rare cases. The sexual energy is released down the spine into the hidden center below the feet, and the point opposite the one above the head. In either case, the sexual energy, the concentrated life force energy, is dissipated and lost. It is similar to discharging a battery into a ground wire. It is no longer in the battery, it is gone forever. This is what all the world's tantric systems I am aware of believe. Orgasm brings one a little closer to death because a person loses his or her life force energy in the orgasm. But the Egyptians have found long ago that it does not have to be this way. Now, I have started using this technique, and I'll explain it, to not lose your sexual energy. It is for this reason that Hindu and Tibetan Tantra systems ask the male to avoid ejaculating. Instead, they speak of these tiny invisible tubes where the sperm migrates up to the higher centers when a student learns to control the orgasm. Both of these systems and the Chinese Taoist Tantra systems are all primarily concerned with the sexual energy flow, sometimes referred to as sexual currents. They are primarily concerned with what happens when the sexual energy is moved before the orgasm, but they all have entirely different views of energy compared to the Egyptians. The Egyptians believed that orgasm is healthy and necessary, but that the sexual energy currents must be controlled in a deeply esoteric procedure that is unlike any other system. They believe that if this energy is controlled, the human orgasm becomes a source of infinite pranic energy that is not lost. They believe that the entire Merkaba, or light body, benefits from this sexual release, and under the right conditions, the orgasm will directly lead to eternal life, and that the Ankh is the key. What has the Ankh to do with sexual energy? It is complicated to explain. Melchizedek kind of shows the way the energy is on your body with upward spiraling energies through your chakras as a cross that kind of stops at your throat chakra in the 5th chakra. So you imagine the cross going from the throat, that's where it becomes the cross. The Ankh shape, if you've seen an Ankh shape, it looks like a cross, but it's circular at the top. Just look it up if you can and understand what that shape is and what it means. It'll help you to understand how it works. Now, Drunvalo Melchizedek explains that there are 4 basic sexual patterns: male, female, bisexual, and neutral. And these are further broken down into polarities: male, male heterosexual, and male homosexual; female, female heterosexual and female homosexual; bisexual, male body and female body; neutral, male body and neutral female body. This makes 8 primary sexual patterns. And when he says, again from this, that the Egyptians did not see us in our body all alone, they perceived and identified 8 completely separate personalities. All 8 personalities are directly related to the original 8 cells, which make the 8 electrical circuits that lead to the primary chakras, which is the basis of the 8 points of the tetrahedron around the body. When a spirit comes to Earth for the first time, it arranges the tetrahedrons around the body in such a way as to be male or female. The personality that emerges is the first one. At the second lifetime, the spirit usually arranges the tetrahedrons in the gender opposite to the first lifetime. The spirit will continue to choose a different point of the tetrahedron to face forward until all 8 points and all 8 personalities have experienced life on Earth. And after the first 8 lifetimes, usually the spirit chooses a rhythm that keeps a sexual balance during its lifetimes on Earth. An example would be to choose 3 male lifetimes followed by 3 female lifetimes, then continue in that pattern. The rhythm could be almost anything the spirit chooses. What happens in almost all cases is that the spirit likes one of the both male and female personalities more than the others and uses it more often. The result is that one male and one female personality become dominant, like a grandfather and a grandmother to the other 6. Then there is a slightly younger one, equivalently to a middle-aged person. Next is a still younger one. These 8 personalities together make up the entire personality complex of the spirit that first came to Earth. And the ancient Egyptians combined the 8 primary sexual modes and the 8 personalities to create the 64 sexual personality configurations associated with Egyptian Tantra, which we can talk about at another time. So the instructions for the Ankh, and this is the instructions, and I will read them, and I'm just telling you it doesn't make sense, but the next time that you try it, you're going to feel the energy shoot out of your body, and then you'll start to see it collect around your body, and you start to enhance the field of energy around your body. That's all I can say. Here's exactly how to achieve the ankhing associated with the human orgasm. Whatever you do sexually before the orgasm is completely up to you. I'm not here to judge you, and definitely the Egyptians would not, since they believe in knowing all 64 sexual modes before you enter the king's chamber to ascend to the next level of consciousness. This is their idea, but it is important to know that it is not necessary. You can reach the next level of consciousness without knowing this information. However, from their point of view, the idea of ankhing is of paramount importance in achieving eternal life. You'll have to decide for yourself if it is something that you wish. 1. The moment you feel the sexual energy about to rise up your spine, take a very deep breath, filling your lungs about 9/10 full, and then hold your breath. 2. You allow the sexual energy of the orgasm to come up your spine, but at the moment it reaches the 5th chakra, using your willpower, you must turn the flow of the sexual energy 90 degrees out the back of the body. It will then automatically continue inside the ankh tube. It will slowly turn until it passes exactly the 8th or 13th chakra, one hand length above the head, at 90 degrees to the vertical. It will then continue to curve around until it returns to the 5th chakra, where it begins. It will often slow down as it approaches the point of origin. Now, he uses a 13 chakra system, which may mean that the lower chakra, the throat chakra, is different. But that's how I've been using, is that throat chakra. It will often slow down as it approaches its point of origin. And if you can see the energy, it comes to a sharp point where it approaches the 5th chakra from the front of the body. There is sometimes a tremendous jolt as it connects with this chakra. All this takes place while you're holding your breath. The instant the sexual energy reconnects with its source, take in the full breath. You had filled your lungs only 9/10 full, so now you fill them as completely as you can. Now exhale very slowly. The sexual energy will continue on around the ankh channel as long as you are exhaling. When you reach the bottom of this breath, you will continue to breathe very deeply, but a change happens here. At this point, continuing to breathe a deep, full breath, but instantly see the sexual energy as prana coming from the 2 poles and meeting in your 5th chakra as before. Be aware your entire Merkaba and feel this energy radiate throughout your entire light body. Now, the 13 chakra system has the 5th chakra as the heart. So I probably have been doing it wrong, and I will continue to work on it. So he's saying when it comes to the heart, then it expends backwards out of your back 90 degrees and then goes up and around your body. So I will see how the difference is the next time I try it. Let this energy reach down into the deepest physical levels of your body structure, even past the cellular level. Every cell becoming rejuvenated by this life force energy. Usually it's just in your body, going straight up through your head and then out. Feel how the beautiful energy surrounds your very being and brings health to your body, mind, and heart. Continue to breathe deeply until you feel the relaxation begin to spread throughout your body, then relax your breath to a normal state. If possible, allow yourself to completely relax or even sleep for a while afterwards, which a lot of people might not have a hard time with. He says if this is practiced for even 1 week, you will even more understand it. It isn't continually practiced. It will begin to give health and strength to your mental, emotional, and physical bodies. It will give great strength and power to your light body as well. If it does not feel right for some reason, then don't do it. The other place that I recommend that you read, which I really can't read much of, is Mantak Chia. There's several books. The Multi-Orgasmic Man, for both women and men, is very specific with very specific things. The most important thing to understand from the Mantak Chia book is that the orgasm is not happening in the body. It is all in the mind. And so that's a big discovery. They talk about looking at the brain and brain energy. It's a book called The Taoist Secrets of Love. And when you understand it's all happening in the mind, that it is a mental thing. They call it the little death. But it isn't a little death. It can save your life. If you imagine when you have that orgasm, what it is you want during that emotion, it will accelerate what you visualize. I also feel like there's something that happens when you're together, and if you can do this together as a joint, both of you manifesting something together, the same thing at the same time, then miracles start to happen. That's all I can say. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I have been fortunate to try these things, and they have worked very well. It is a part of who we are in every way, shape, and form. And I would love to know what you think. Obviously, there's something to it. A lot of people talk about it. A lot of the discussion of reality creation is very sexual. A lot of people talk about finding love. A lot of people talk about finding their specific person. That's a sexual desire. A lot of people talk about those things, and it's undeniable. It would be wrong of me to ignore it, although I have avoided it for almost 370 episodes for a reason, because there's a lot of stuff that I could talk about that I probably shouldn't talk about, and we'll see how this turns out. But I give you this as a beginning stage. Go and study Tantra. Go and study Egyptian Tantra. Go and study the way that your body creates an orgasm. Notice how you feel afterwards and how you feel towards people. Are your sexual urges about domination, or is it about love? Really break down, become the observer of yourself sexually. And when you do that, you will have more power and understanding of how it's affecting your life and how you use these energies. A lot of stuff has been talked about, and probably best to go back over it. There really isn't a need for me to summarize this, but there's some techniques here, and some discussion on how to transmute energy and how successful people take that energy and turn it into something else. So there's multiple different ideas that have been discussed here from the ages of time, and I hope that it helps you in your journey. Don't ignore it. You know, it's really funny. In another relationship I was with a very Christian person that had, for some reason, thought that all sex is evil. And when, for instance, two people would start kissing on a movie, then she would immediately feel guilty. But she'd have no problem watching people get killed in a movie. But if people start having sex, then she would avert her eyes and would try to avert the eyes of people around her because of what she had been taught when she was younger. And there are people out there that have this feeling that just watching sexual images or thinking about sex is so evil that they're going to hell for it. And that's just not true. You would not exist without it. And it is a natural part of what we do in this universe. It's how we are created. Obviously, if God wanted us to be created in a different way, he would not have made that the emphasis. This feeling that is related to it are feelings that can be reproduced without orgasm. You can have an orgasm without the ejaculation, according to Montauk Chia. And that is pretty amazing as well. There's so much to this. There's so many places that you can go with this. I hope this is a good beginning discussion of the spiritual aspects of sexual energy and how to transmute it. Thank you for joining me, and I would love to read your comments. All episodes of The Reality Revolution can be found at therealityrevolution.com. And welcome to The Reality Revolution.